Hello, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Homeless Persons Memorial Day, How to Plan, Organize, and Remember. Today's webinar is organized by the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council in partnership with the National Coalition for the Homeless and the National Consumer Advisory Board. This webinar is made possible in part by the support of the Health Resources and Services Administration. My name is Daniel Rabbit, staff at the Council, and I'll be acting as today's moderator for the webinar. First, allow me to go over some housekeeping for all of our attendees. Today's webinar will be a 1-hour presentation with the last 15 minutes reserved for question and answers. Below the presentation slide, there is a chat box for participant questions and technical issues. Please type your questions or technical issues into that chat box at any time during the presentation. A selected number of questions will be answered at the end of the presentation, but again, please feel free to type in your questions at any time. Also note that this presentation is being recorded and will be posted to our website within 72 hours. Our website is at www.nhchc.org. All participants also have a full screen button located on the bottom left of the PowerPoint presentation. You may use this to resize the presentation to full screen, but then you will not be able to see or access the Q&A chat box. To enable this view, simply re-click the full screen button to revert to the original view. To get started, let me first introduce our excellent panel of speakers. First, we have John Lozier, Executive Director of the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council. John has been doing this work for many, many years and has been promoting Homeless Persons Memorial Day for just about the same amount of time. He will be going over the importance and history of Homeless Persons Memorial Day and in part about how the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council and National Coalition for the Homeless have been collaborating. Next, we will have Michael Stoops, the Director of Community Organizing for the National Coalition for the Homeless. Michael will be going over the organizing manual that the coalition puts together. The brand new one for 2012 came out today. Next, we will then have Adam Schneider, the Community Relations Coordinator at Healthcare for the Homeless in Baltimore. Adam helps coordinate the planning of Homeless Persons Memorial Day in concert with the consumer group in Baltimore, Be More Housing for All. We also have James Crawford, who is the chair of Be More Housing for All and a regional representative for the National Consumer Advisory Board. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, we will have Joseph Benson, chair of the National Consumer Advisory Board and chair of his local CAB in Houston at Healthcare for the Homeless Houston. Joseph and Adam and James will both be providing examples of how they plan their events locally. So with that, I'm just going to get the webinar started and pass it on over to John. John?
Thank you very much, Dan. It's well established that homelessness and death run together. A survey that Jim O'Connell did for us 7 years ago now looked at all the literature on mortality and homelessness and found a fact that you're probably all painfully aware of. Homeless people die young, on average about 30 years younger than people who are not homeless or have not had that rough experience. There was a study published in England just last week that came up with the very same number reflecting the homeless experience in Great Britain, 30 years of lost life due to homelessness. It makes sense when you think about it. Homelessness and very poor health run together. Part of that is because there are numerous structural barriers to care, including, most importantly, the problem of uninsurance in our country, but broader problems around the adequacy of the clinic system and the provider supply, and the capacity and the cultural competence of providers to actually deal with the health problems that homeless people have. Those problems relate to all the exposure to the sun and the rain and the cold and the heat, to violence and injury and parasites of all sorts that come with living on the streets. Problems that are associated with why people go to the streets and end up on the streets in the first place often have to do with personal health problems, mental illnesses, and substance abuse disorders that tend to select who ends up actually on the streets in a overall situation of very, very limited affordable housing supply. We know from the recent studies done in Boston that the leading cause of death there now for homeless people is drug overdoses related to the health problem of substance use disorders. On the streets, a number of things complicate one's ability to deal with poor health, including inability to store and keep medications safely, no place to go to recuperate from illness. We're working on respite care facilities to respond to that, nutrition, and a host of other problems. We do work on the systemic problems, and Homeless Persons Memorial Day is a wonderful opportunity to sort of grab public attention and to talk about the issues that underlie homelessness. But at its root, this day is a day for people to grieve together for the lives that we do lose because of all of these problems. In the late 1980s, as we began to see the real impact of the flood of homelessness that we began to experience earlier in that decade, cities across the country independently began putting together Memorial Day events to remember those who had died. In 1990, the National Coalition for the Homeless stepped forward and began to coordinate those events nationally. We've been proud to work with them for a number of years since then, as the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council and the National Consumer Advisory Board have collaborated in promoting this event. And I'm very pleased that our good friend Michael Stoops, the Director of Community Organizing for the National Coalition for the Homeless, is here to tell us a little bit about how we go about organizing it nationally and the resources that are available to you. Michael.
Thank you, John, and it's good to be on this call. We hope that this webinar will be helpful for both the 145 cities or 175 cities that took part last year, and also for new communities who've never hosted a Memorial Day in their community. National Homeless Persons Memorial Day is one of the probably the most important public education event that we do throughout the course of the year. In 2001, we had that record number of cities take part, and we expect even more communities to take part this coming December. And the event is always, most communities do it on December 21st, but other communities have other dates either on, before, or even after December 21st. In terms of organizing at the local level, feel free to touch base with the three national organizations that are holding events. It's important that homeless people and consumers be involved in not just showing up, but in the planning and the decision-making and the speaking and evaluation of the event. There are a number of resources available. The Homeless Persons, the organizing manual for this year's campaign is up on the National Coalition for the Homeless website. If you go to nationalhomeless.org and go to projects, you will find the organizing manual. You can also request technical assistance. We're available 7 days a week, not 24 hours a day, but at least 12. And just the scope of the event, the map, you'll see that Memorial Day is happening everywhere in the country, and the Northeast and Florida and California and the Pacific Northwest have had the most events. And with that, I will turn it over to Dan.
Thank you, Michael. So John and Michael both kind of gave all of our attendees an overview of the history of the event and some of the resources that are available. I'd really encourage people to check out specifically the organizing manual which has a ton of templates for press releases and for sample resolutions that public officials can provide. It really does kind of drill down into the nuts and bolts especially for those communities that haven't organized something in the past. To additionally aid in that drilling down to what does this look like on the local level, we have 2 case studies that we're going to provide for you guys next. First will be from Healthcare for the Homeless Baltimore with Adam Schneider and James Crawford talking about how they plan their event and also how they have extended it into a series of public education forums, an opportunity for advocacy and the like. And then we will move on to hear from Joseph Benson in Houston, who will go over how they plan their event and how they use it also as an opportunity for connecting people with services in sort of a health fair sort of a model as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it on over to Adam and James to talk about how they do it in Baltimore. Guys?
Thank you, Dan. This slide is the cover, front and back of our Memorial Day service program last year. Baltimore's long organized a memorial service for its clients and for other people who have experienced homelessness, who have died, and we have organized that on or about the 21st of December. In recent years, this effort has really expanded beyond HCH and has become a real community effort involving other service providers, faith communities, students, people with direct experiences of homelessness, public officials, and we're going to talk a little bit about how that has manifested.
My name is James Crawford, and so here's some of the things we do with our Homeless Persons Memorial Day service. We have a remembrance where we remember the people who have passed away. We also raise community awareness because we want to put a face on homelessness and let people that know that these people did not die by themselves or not being remembered by anyone. When you do that, it makes the person that passed away more human. Because I know sometimes people who see people who they perceive as homeless and look right through them or say something nasty remark to them. But on this night, we are dedicating that night to the people who have passed.
And we take that personalization and recognition of the meaning of these individuals' lives and take that a step further through community awareness and engagement about the experiences. We recognize that homelessness is not inevitable. We know how to end homelessness, and deaths as a result of homelessness are also not inevitable. What it takes is committing and recommitting to ending the causes of homelessness, and that's part of the frame that we use, recognizing and trying to live by the words of Mother Jones, right? We want to pray for the dead, but fight like hell for the living.
We also hold these public forums, and this is to get out to people just what's going on, because we've found out that there's a lot of clergy and lay people that does not understand what homelessness is. So this is a chance for us to take the message to the neighborhoods and to the colleges and to other centers and put that face on homelessness.
We've also worked to connect Homeless Persons Memorial Day to other opportunities that people have to engage in issues related to homelessness and poverty. National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week is held the week before the week of Thanksgiving in lead up to Homeless Persons Memorial Day. That week, locally, students organize a myriad of events on and off their campuses to raise awareness about the experiences of homelessness. The Maryland General Assembly session runs for 90 days beginning in January, and so an event at the end of December really is a good opportunity to engage people, not only in remembering the people who have passed, but remembering why they died and then taking action on that. The city's 10-year plan, lots of cities around the country have engaged in 10-year plans to end homelessness. This is also an opportunity to reinvigorate that conversation, to talk about what needs to be done if we really are going to bring an end to homelessness. As James mentioned, the Memorial Day forums are really a series of events that offer the opportunity to educate about these issues and what can be done to address them. They also build momentum and awareness of Homeless Persons Memorial Day itself. As you might be able to see on the flyer of this slide, we try to engage members of the press as moderators for these events. They tend to be good at facilitating communication, and it also builds important relationships with the media. The panels tend to consist of community leaders with experience on the issues, including and especially people who have directly experienced homelessness. In years past, we've held a forum each week between Thanksgiving and Homeless Persons Memorial Day, which for those of you who are thinking through that, that's 4 events in 4 weeks' time. While really effective at building momentum, it ended up being a lot of commitment, both for organizers and for audience members during a pretty busy time of the year. It also, I think, led to a substantial graying of my hair. More recently, what we've tried to do is to organize events in the months leading up, so starting on September 21st and then October 21st, then in November, having events that lead up to Memorial Day where we can still build momentum and build community awareness. In fact, we've done such a good job at engaging community members. A faith group that's interested in and working on issues related to homelessness has actually formed out of this organizing effort and has now taken on one of those forums and organizes it every year for the past 3 years. Here's an example of some of the topics that we have had in recent years. Some relate to research that has come out recently. Some are sort of long-standing issues. Homelessness and the housing question has been around for at least 140 years. John talked about the research that came out of Boston, Jim O'Connell's work on homelessness, health, and premature mortality. When that came out in 2005, we had a forum. When the city of Baltimore was considering expanding its living wage law, we had a forum on that issue. So really it depends on what's going on locally, because we want to make sure that this is something that really resonates with the community and allows for greater education. We're now going to talk about the service itself.
Okay. Homeless Person Memorial Day service, as you know, is held on December the 21st. And at that service, we give names out to people in the audience to read of people who have passed away. Now, we always have some kind of a luminary that goes along with the service, and we find that, it's very amusing, and people, that touches their heart. Especially, we did the one with shoes, and that really touched people's hearts, because they looked at all those shoes sitting out there, and it was like 110 or somewhere around that pair of shoes sitting on these platforms, and they got to see how many people died in their city from being homeless that year.
Yeah, that visual symbol, I think, has been one of the things that really has stuck with me every year. The visual symbol representing the people that have died. As James said, it typically involves a luminary of some sort, candles passed out to those in attendance, one for each person who is remembered, which we've lit as their names are read. We've had decorated luminaries kind of in the audience area of the amphitheater so that people can see the number of people that are missing. And then in the past couple of years had a pair of shoes, each with a candle, and a decorated name tag to represent those who have passed away. And one of the things that I think that really helps with is setting the stage and allowing people at the beginning of the service to light candles and to reflect individually as they're gathering on the service that is going to take place.
The service usually includes music, poetry, artwork. We have the luminaries, which I talked about already, and we get resolutions from the mayor, the governor last year, and sometimes from city council. The litany of names is, have stories. I think it was like 1 out of every 8 person, there was a story about that person who passed away from people who knew them. And we did that last year, and I thought that was very moving also, because now we're not just reading the names, we're giving you a little background on that person and how they lived before they became homeless, how they lived while they was homeless, and the reason why they died, because they were homeless.
One of the things that we look to, since we have our event outside, we always have a message, a main speaker, or main reflection as part of the service. Typically, we look for somebody who can offer an interfaith reflection that is both meaningful and, since December 21st here can be rather cold, we also look for somebody who can be somewhat brief, because the reading of names, as you can see, can take a while. This is really, I think, the most substantial and significant part of the service, this litany of names. A group of speakers, as James said, including service providers, public officials, students, faith leaders, people experiencing homelessness themselves, reads the names of those who have died. Everybody in attendance says, "We will remember," following each of the names. We collect these names really by engaging service providers, by engaging people who have experienced homelessness, if they know somebody who has passed away over the course of the year, and engaging the medical examiner's office, who has been really helpful to us in identifying folks. And as James said, in the past couple of years, we've collected and read brief stories or reflections written by people who knew the folks that were being remembered. Last year, there were just a few sentence reflections dispersed throughout the litany of names, and made it really meaningful and really reminded you that these aren't just names of people, but these people had lives. We've engaged many partners, as we've sort of talked through already, and it's really become a community event. In addition to attending the event, artists design things like the luminaries, like the bulletins. They perform at the service. One of our local NPR stations dedicates a show each year to the issue of homelessness on or about December 21st and recites the names of everybody who is being remembered. Local press covers the event and has printed the names of those who are remembered in the paper each year. Public officials have, as James said, introduced resolutions recognizing Homeless Persons Memorial Day. Some years ago, we produced a packet of materials for faith communities, which they've used and continue to use in planning services or study groups in the weeks leading up to Homeless Persons Memorial Day. Some faith communities have printed the names of those remembered in their bulletins or read them at their services. Some have rung bells at 5:30 on the night of the 21st, once for each person remembered. And a few years ago, we had a memorial service outside of a church, and just as the names were finishing being read, the bells started ringing, and for what seemed like a long, long time, the bells just kept ringing and ringing, which was incredibly powerful.
Well, when we do this here, we have some goals in mind. First of all, we want people to remember the people who passed away that year. And don't just take the paper with their names on it and put it in your pocket or throw it in the trash. Ask them to put it on their refrigerator, because that's something they use every day. And when you open that refrigerator, you see that list of names, and you know that you don't want it to be that large next year. And plus, it gives you incentive to come out and do something about it. And the form, it also the form makes it so that service providers and others can engage in this. It's something that, you know, we knew, because not all service providers understand homelessness either.
So we really want to seize on the energy and, frankly, outrage that comes from a service like this to encourage people to take action, to advocate, to educate themselves and their communities, and to serve those who need it. We have, finally, a little bit of a work plan, some key pieces in our Homeless Persons Memorial Day planning process. Of course, if you add forums, this increases the list of things to do. We begin pretty early, but you certainly could begin planning now and carry out a very successful and meaningful Homeless Persons Memorial Day. Some of the key things, I think, are securing permits. If you're going to hold the service in a public space, that's important to do early. We've also found that, especially given the hectic nature of the end of December, it can be challenging to find musicians and a main speaker, so we start that early as well. We also start the name collection as early as possible, reaching out to providers, because we want to make sure that everybody who is remembered by somebody in the community is remembered at the service. And then, obviously, also remembering the people, recognizing that there are people who we will miss. Following the service, it's important to evaluate and debrief, because we want to learn from the successes and from the things that we can do better with a view to next year's effort. So that's a little bit about our work here in Baltimore. And now I want to turn it over to Joseph so he can give some perspective on the work in Houston. Joseph?
All right, thank you for passing it over to us here in Houston. Ours is not as elaborate as you all over in Baltimore, but we always start off with collaborations and partnerships. We think that's the strongest thing about what we do here in Houston. We get with Coalition for the Homeless Houston and Harris County, and we would like to send out thank yous to Gary Greer and his associates and colleague Scott Moore for the work that they do in helping us put it together, because they do a lot of the groundwork along with the people that's on the cab for the Coalition for the Homeless Houston and Harris County, and with the Healthcare for the Homeless Houston cab also, but we call our cab the Change Committee. We are the persons who take the lead in the planning of this event each year. It's this, and one of the things that we do with the collaboration, we reach out to the service providers in Houston to get them to participate, because our Homeless Memorial evening is more like a fair, like what Dan had mentioned earlier, because we get the service providers to put up tables and bring out information so we can let those individuals here in Houston that's experiencing homelessness know about the different services that they can receive here. And we also reach out to the faith group, because the faith groups is another important portion of the collaboration that we have here in Houston. We also reach out to City Hall and our county commissioners. We invite the mayor and her city council there, and we also invite the judge who sees over the commissioners in Houston and his colleagues also. And then the coroner's office play a large part, because they are the ones who collect all the names for us and make sure that we get those names, those individuals that passed away during the course of the year. And we also get the information if someone is left off and one of the service providers know about it, we make sure that we get the names from them also. Next is the planning. You know, because ours is not big and we don't have a music and a lot of other things involved, one of the things we want to show in this webinar that you don't have to start in the middle of the year. You can start in the latter part of October or the 1st of November, according to how large event you're putting together. But one of the main things, whether it's a large event or a small event, you first must obtain the permits necessary in order to use a public place. That's the great thing about it. And without the relationship that we have with City Hall, they normally give us all those permits, and we pay approximately $150 worth of on the permits ourselves. And then we constantly have a contact with the coroner's office so we can make sure that we have the individual names that we need. Next is location. We're fortunate enough by having a relationship with our City Hall. We have our homeless memorial event on the steps of City Hall. And in the slide you see the picture of Houston City Hall, and we have a reflection pool that the service providers take and set up their tables around so that they can pass out the information to the community. We normally get a proclamation from the mayor, and either she comes out and read it, or a person from her office always read it. And one of the reasons why we choose downtown Houston is that here in Houston, most of the major service providers that we have is located in and around City Hall in downtown Houston. Next is being able to get the information out to the community. A lot of it is done word by mouth, and it's done from the different cabs by getting in contact with individuals that they know that's still in transition from homelessness, or they're formerly homeless individuals, so we can get them to know about it and invite them out. We also talk about it at the different cab meetings. We use the telephones by calling the different stakeholders to make sure that they know that, the time, and to get them there in a timely manner so they can sit up the tables and put out all the information that they use. We normally make up a flyer. We get in contact with the media, both the radio stations and the television stations. And Healthcare for the Homeless Houston always take and put something up on their website, so individuals that's surfing the web, they can get that information from them also. And one of the things I like about it is that from being able to get the information out to the community, last year we had between 300 to 400 attendees at our event. And then we set up the agenda. We normally always start off with prayer, and then eulogy is always by one of the local ministers that we have. And then we take the name and divide the names up by the different individuals that come from City Hall, the U.S. vets, different service providers, and other individuals that know some of the individuals that passed through that year, so they can talk about those individuals also. Information about homelessness is at the different tables that's set up by the different service providers. And one of the things that we do, we make sure we have, because here in Houston during that particular time it's getting cool in Houston, and we make sure we have sack lunches for the individuals. We pass out blankets, and we have other things like hygiene products to pass out also. But the main thing that we make sure is that we don't want the politicians to use this as their soapbox to get over their information about themselves. Now I'll pass it back to Dan, and he'll take it from here.
Okay, thanks so much, Joseph. So we're hoping that those two examples can kind of give all of our audience an idea of just how, of all the different ways that you can promote and plan a Homeless Persons Memorial Day event. I'm going to open it up for questions now. The first question we have is for Adam and James. It asks if the packet that Baltimore has produced for religious communities available for other cities to use.
Yeah, that would be something that we could certainly make available. I guess what we'll do is talk to the National Council and the National Coalition and see if there's some way that they can make it available, but certainly happy to share anything that we've done.
Yeah, I think talk to Sheila from we talked to Sheila from the Baltimore United Congregations. I believe she would have something on that also. So yeah, that's possible. We can do that.
And we have a page on our website at the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council devoted to Homeless Persons Memorial Day, and we'll certainly be happy to get those from Baltimore and post that material there.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, guys. So the next question just came in. We have this is from Rebecca Cox. The question is, do you include formerly homeless individuals that have passed on to during participation in a housing program in your Memorial Day service or list of names. I think what that is getting at is, do you have to be presently homeless when you pass away to be remembered during the service? Why don't I pass that one over to Joseph to hear about it in Houston, and then if Adam and James want to comment as well, feel free. Joseph?
All right, thank you, Dan. Well, here in Houston, we pass on those individuals because we try to keep in contact with those individuals by having them be involved in the consumer advisory boards. And so if we know about those individuals, yes, ma'am, we do.
Yeah, we also here in Baltimore remember people who have died but who in life have lacked a stable place to live. People that are known to us, we will include in the memorial service. Yes.
Yeah, and especially if somebody was homeless for any time that year, and now they got housing, and they died right after they got the housing, because we have some of that happen. We do include those people.
Sure. And Michael, is there any kind of guidance or assistance in the organizing manual about how to obtain these names, who should be included in the litany, things of that nature?
Yes, in our organizing manual there are some tips on how do you go about finding out who died in poverty during the most recent year. So if people look at that manual, you will see some good information on the various steps that you should do to come up with a listing of names.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Our next question is to Joseph, and it asks a little bit more specifically about the coroner's office in Houston. This question asks, do coroners keep records of those who died homeless? How is the coroner helpful in the process of identifying these individuals? Joseph?
Well, we're fortunate enough that the coroner here in Houston have a relationship with us, and they do keep a record of those individuals that they know when they passed away was homeless at that particular time, and and even if they're in a transitional type living or living in one of the shelters, they keep that information also. But besides just relying on the coroners, we also get information from the different service providers too.
Okay, great. Thank you, Joseph. And Adam and James, I know you guys work with the medical examiner. I'm not too clear on what the difference between the coroner and the medical examiner are, but do you have anything to add to that question?
Yeah, so our medical examiner's office does keep a record as well. If somebody dies and they don't have a address on the person, typically these deaths will occur outdoors. There's just in their recording, they click a button whether it's homeless or not. So our medical examiner is good enough to run that query for us every year, and it's a way to ensure that we're remembering everybody, and especially those who are so vulnerable that they might not even have been connected up with service providers.
And we keep not only with the coroner's office, but we also keep tabs on the ones that were in programs like alcohol and drug programs. There's a place called McVets here, Maryland Center for Veterans Education and Training, and I go there each year, and they have it on their computer how many people, the names of the people who have passed. So that kind of thing helps us out a lot too.
Well, thank you, guys. We have another question that just came in asking about nicknames. If somebody or somebody's family prefers to maintain confidentiality for someone who has experienced homelessness, are nicknames or other ways to ensure privacy used in the reading of names? Michael, do you want to take that first about what the National Coalition suggests on those matters?
Here in Washington, D.C. at our event, we always honor the wishes of the family. If a family does not want their loved one mentioned during a memorial service, we will not use the full legal name. We will use a nickname, a John Doe, a Jane Doe, or even the initials, but we always honor the family's wishes.
And how do you go about contacting the family? How are they involved in the process of collecting names?
Family members oftentimes hear about the memorial event, that their loved one is going to be remembered at the memorial service. So we are often, once or twice a year, we are contacted by a family of someone who's passed away, and they have special things they want us to say or not to say.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Adam, James, or Joseph, do you guys have anything to add?
Well, just like what Mike was saying, if the family member do know that that individual in passing, they don't want their name listed, yes, we always honor what the family wants. But, you know, amongst the community, a lot of times you don't get a chance to know the individual, especially if they're not in a program or in a shelter. You don't really know that individual's last name, and a lot of people go by nicknames. And so if we don't have their given name, we always use a nickname.
Because sometimes we have people that we use their nickname because nobody knows their real name. So, you know, we don't want to leave anyone out. And as far as respecting the wishes of the family, that could be done. There's no problem with that. You know, if they want us to use a different name for that person, we can do that. We just want to get it out there that these are people who died because they were not housed, and they didn't have health care and don't have a living wage.
Okay. Thank you, James. Joseph? Our next question I'm going to assign to Michael. It asks, are there examples of letters to send out in order to get names, donations, reach out to speakers? Are there template letters of that sort in the organizing manual?
Not in this year's manual, but we can give you guidance on what to say and what to put in the letters, but that's a good idea for a manual in the future.
Yep, and I would remind everybody, if you have a specific question that is not addressed in the organizing manual, you can always contact Michael, John, myself, or NCAB generally at ncab@nhchc.org. And we are more than happy to help any community out in those various questions about planning an event. And we have the next question. I'm going to assign this one to Adam and James. This question asks, can you elaborate a bit more on how you publicized your event and how you obtained press contacts?
We pay attention during the whole year to press around issues of homelessness and poverty, and work throughout the year to cultivate relationships with members of the press in various different ways. So, you know, even just sending a note to a reporter saying, hey, that was a great story, and just want to let you know a little bit about what we're doing is a good way to start building relationships. Letters to the editor, press releases, and if there are community calendars. I think that reaching out to local radio stations, as I said, our NPR station does a program every year on or about Homeless Persons Memorial Day. And, you know, I mean, just the relationship building is important to do all year long, and then to send out press releases ahead of time to the contacts that you've made.
Yep, and there are sample press releases in the organizing manual as well. Joseph, do you have anything to add about the outreach that you guys do in Houston to the press, or just advertisement in general?
Well, what we do is this, like they were saying in Baltimore, you know, we try to keep a relationship with the press all year long. And we have certain individuals that have an ear and a heart for the homeless community, and we make sure we invite those guys out to those particular events. And then public radio station is a great person for us here in Houston because they're always looking to help us get the information out about the homeless community. And through having those little constant relationships, it makes it really easy for us to get information out.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Joseph. We have another question now coming from Matt in Las Cruces, New Mexico. This question, again, can really be answered by anybody. Why don't we start with Michael with what's included in the organizing manual generally. This question asks, how do you go about recognizing homeless victims of violence that have died from violence on the streets? Are any special considerations given to people who have died in that way rather than to more natural causes? Michael, you first.
The National Coalition for the Homeless, since 1999, we have been tracking violence and hate crimes against homeless individuals that oftentimes result in death. We treat, in the Memorial Day service here in D.C., we don't have a category. These are the folks who've been murdered. These are the folks who have who've been attacked in their sleep. We just list the names.
Okay. Adam and James, do you want to add something? Or?
Yeah, we usually don't go into specific details about how people died or the circumstances, whether it was targeted violence or just the inherently violent nature of homelessness. We just want to remember they're alive.
Okay. Joseph, any last thing to add? It seems like that's the last question.
No, it's the same thing here in Houston. We don't come out and say our individual was murdered. The main thing what we try to do is that this is a remembrance on the individuals that passed away while they was homeless.
Okay. Thank you, Joseph. So that will conclude our question and answer session. Thank you so much to all our attendees for so many great and insightful questions. I wanted to close by reminding everybody of all of the resources that are available on our respective websites. We've talked a great deal about the 2012 Homeless Persons Memorial Day Organizing Manual. That link there on the slide will take you there. We also have recently posted it on our homepage, which is the third bullet down, or third website down on this slide, www.nhchc.org. It'll be on one of the latest news posts on the left-hand side, and it's also been posted to the National Coalition for the Homeless website, again, under their projects tab. So that's really like your go-to spot for additional information and resources. Also, please don't hesitate to contact any of the speakers involved in today's webinar. While you're checking out the organizing manual, please also visit our website for a variety of other resources. If there are consumers of Healthcare for the Homeless projects on the line and attending the webinar today, please consider becoming an individual member. It is free and will allow you to participate in other National Consumer Advisory Board projects. And even for anybody who is interested in healthcare for homeless people, please consider becoming an individual member. So that will bring our webinar to a close today. Thank you everyone for attending. Please don't forget to fill out the evaluation. You'll receive it momentarily once we close the webinar officially. And thanks so much for your interest in remembering those who passed on. Take care and have a great rest of your day.